Puerto Rican Voices is brought to you by the Center for Puerto Rican Studies, with the generous support of the New York City Council and Hunter College of the City University of New York.
Saludos. My name is Edwin Melendez. I'm the director of the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College. Today we're talking about the aftermath of Hurricane Maria and its effects in the agricultural sector in Puerto Rico. Over 80% of the food is imported to Puerto Rico. The agricultural sector was one of the most affected by Hurricane Maria. 80% of the crops were lost. Here to talk more about this sector and its importance to Puerto Rico and the impact of the Hurricane Maria, we have today with us Dr. Ramon Borges Mendez. He is a planner by training. He has been in Puerto Rico frequently. We'd like to welcome him to the show. Saludos, Ramon.
¿Cómo están?
Thank you so much for being here with us. Ramon, I would like to introduce the next segment by asking you a few questions about the effects of the hurricane in the industry, and what can you tell us about your impressions as you have visited Puerto Rico?
The impact was very direct, but also a series of very important indirect effects. Direct effects destroyed what already was a very weakened sector in terms of having destroyed crops, having destroyed infrastructure, roads, and machinery. Second, accelerated the depopulation of the region with very important secondary or indirect effects such as breakdown of households, unavailability of work, and simply there are no people to work in the region. And I think finally there has been a profound environmental impact that has taken place as the hurricane really destroyed the forest, destroyed other aspects of the natural resource base of the region, which are fundamental for coffee to grow.
Also, can you talk a little bit about the impact of the environment as it affects the agricultural sector?
The impact on the environment by Maria comes by way of various channels. But first, the forest in Puerto Rico has suffered greatly, and it takes many years for forests to sort of grow back. The second, it impacted bird populations and also very important aspects about the process of pollination. Because insects have been completely depleted, as well as birds, as I mentioned. Also, it changed temperature, because when the trees are destroyed, temperature tends to be sort of also affected, and that affects the ecosystemic components that are part of the coffee region agricultural production in the central part.
Ramon, can you also talk a little bit about the impact of the hurricane on the infrastructure of the area to sustain agricultural production?
You have to understand that coffee especially, you need a series of coffee goes through a series of stages. So you don't only pick the coffee, then you have to process the coffee, you have to aggregate the coffee, then you have to roast the coffee, you have to transport it to a variety of places. So the roads were heavily affected in the region. Machinery, which was already old, is basically stopped. Electricity, which is fundamental to grow the roasting equipment and other kind of machinery, was not available. So the impact not only affected the natural component, but also affected the infrastructure that is heavily and very important for the purpose of coffee production and other agriculture production.
We have some interviews from coffee growers, producers in Puerto Rico. So let's watch a little bit of what they say about the crisis in agriculture. And can you and I talk on the other side to discuss? Let's take a look.
Y aquí estamos. en lo más que yo amo, la tierra. Aquí estamos a 3.000 pies, el huracán nos dio por todos lados. Obviamente aquí estamos expuestos tanto para el mar Atlántico como para el mar Caribe. Y esto quedó totalmente devastado, tuvimos que renovarla. Estamos nuevamente con más ánimo que nunca, no hay marcha atrás. Para que este arbolito llegara a este tamaño, primero obviamente hay que llevarlo al vivero, germinar el granito, se trasplanta y aquí aproximadamente esto tiene de 10 meses a un año. Comenzaremos a ver café en Puerto Rico comercialmente, digamos, para abastecer el consumo en el 2024. Por eso es que estamos en la peor crisis de la industria del café.
La agricultura en Puerto Rico y la agricultura en el mundo debe ser la empresa más importante, es la que suple los alimentos. Actualmente quedábamos antes de María aproximadamente 4.000 caficultores, producíamos entre 15 a 20.000 empleos directos e indirectos. La industria del café está enclavada en los 21 municipios de la región central en Puerto Rico y prácticamente lo que mueve esta región, lo que crea actividad económica, lo que crea desarrollo social es la industria del café. Por eso cuando hablamos de café, pensemos realmente en cuánto aporta al desarrollo social a un sector en específico. Yo diría que el 90% del café, del consumo de 250.000 es importado. ¿Pero por qué sucede eso? Si tenemos un consumo de 250.000 y este año tuvimos una cosecha de 20.000 quintales, por lo tanto, de alguna manera tenemos que suplir la demanda. Ese café viene de las importaciones, puede ser de México, puede ser de República Dominicana, de la persona que se lleve a la subasta. ¿Cómo nosotros podemos evitar eso? Obviamente invirtiendo en la industria del café, dándonos semillas, ayudándonos con abonos, ayudándonos con distintos incentivos, ayudándonos a que el empleado agrícola tenga una mejor paga.
Somos un grupo de mujeres, todas con nuestras profesiones, pero con algo en común que es la agricultura. Y nos hemos unido para poder hacer el proyecto Bucaramón. El proyecto Bucaramón es un proyecto social que busca hacer que la comunidad comience a crecer económicamente nuevamente.
Nosotros queremos revitalizar la finca y volver a traer proyectos tanto agroecológicos como de agricultura regular.
Es bien importante motivar a las personas, es bien importante educar a las personas. Muchas personas en esta comunidad, así como en las comunidades aledañas, no tienen la información necesaria para poder sembrar. Muchas personas están dependiendo de programas del gobierno y lo que necesitamos es que comiencen a ser más independientes de esos programas y comiencen a ser empresarios. Otra cosa bien importante es promover la agricultura ecológica. Eso es algo que en Puerto Rico está surgiendo nuevamente y necesitamos apoyar ese tipo de agricultura. ¿Por qué? Porque aquí en este centro también nosotros queremos hacer lo que se llama actualmente un farm to table, que es llevar el producto de la finca a la mesa, que la gente comienza a diferenciar lo que es el producto hecho aquí versus el de afuera, que comience a educarse en ese sentido de comida.
Coming up next at Puerto Rican Voices.
The first story that I heard from my grandmother's lips, Perez and Martina, has been my golden key in opening doors for me everywhere.
It is just a fundamentally unique experience to read about characters that you can identify with. If you just read what she published, you would only have a fraction of a very skewed view of what she was writing. Thank goodness we have her archives here.
Welcome back to Puerto Rican Voices.
Ramon, can you comment on what Chris and Jacqueline have said about the impact of the hurricane on coffee production?
The impact clearly shows that we're going to need to make significant investments to bring it back, right? Because that coffee it requires technology. The island has been quite behind in terms of technological production and the capacity to invest in science and technology to grow new coffee varieties. There is no strategy for including the local producers. There are sort of quick fix solutions that seek to plant the region with cheap coffee. The local producers who have been there for some of them over 100 years need attention. There needs to be a regional perspective because most of those solutions take up on a regional character. And finally, there needs to be capacity to also involve the municipalities in the process of economic development. This cannot just simply come from the central government, and there needs to be local capacity, and that needs to be grounded in the region. That extension agricultural infrastructure, which was already obsolete, now is practically inexistent.
Obviously, the agricultural industry is not just coffee. There are many other components. We interviewed some of the producers that are trying to develop agro-tourism and production of agriculture that is linked to other sectors in the economy. So we are going to interview a few people related to the Visit Rico, which is a group of farmers that are actually promoting ecotourism. So please stay with us and we will comment on that on the other end.
After Maria, we first started with phase 1, which was to get funds, direct economic funds for farmers to know that they could have some money to continue their work. They can start off again and not leave the country. We needed farmers at the farms to continue supporting our agriculture and protecting our patrimony. Agritourism is a way of ecological tourism, ecotourism, but it gives people the opportunity to visit the place where the farmers work, where the food comes from, how is it produced, stories behind our culture, gastronomy, and meeting the farmers who are the ones that bring food to our table, hopefully. Because of course in Puerto Rico we import 85% of the food, and that is something we want to break. We want people to see face to face the people who produce food in Puerto Rico. We had help from a lot of volunteers that came to Colaboratorio, and they're actually still on our team. They have been great. They came at the perfect time. We got Farm Aid to support us. That was the first big connection we got. We raised over $490,500. It went directly to the farmers. It was over 40 farmers that received this fund from them.
Coming up next at Puerto Rican Voices.
The fact that we have a Center for Puerto Rican Studies is something that you can't get anywhere else.
I'd say it's probably the most important research resource for anyone learning about the diaspora.
People who are passionate about our history and culture can go and learn more about who we are.
Centro pinpoints and expresses what Puerto Ricans are all about, what their history is all about, their culture.
As a journalist, it's very useful because it provides well-researched statistics of our communities throughout the United States.
And the journal is unique in that it is the only journal that publishes research articles on the Puerto Rican experience.
You can find old records, you can find old photographs, you can even find old puppets from the Pura del Pre archives.
It holds our history and protects it, and without Centro, without the archives, without the library, all these materials would be in jeopardy.
Welcome back to Puerto Rican Voices.
Ramon, what I would like to talk about now is what can we do for the agricultural sector? Do you have any reactions to the Visit Rico and ecotourism presentation that we just heard?
Agriculture has been not maximized as a very important resource in Puerto Rico for many years. Yet we can achieve a great deal by improving three things. Number one, the connectivity between the actors and the people who participate in the sector. And I think that's critical, for example, for the farm-to-table movement, for the creation of organic markets, for the creation of a variety of other venues in which the local agriculture can be an important input. Number two, the fact that in agriculture, especially in the island, we're talking about small agriculture at this point, it's very unlikely that people will have available employment all year long. So a good part of making agriculture a viable sector is also connecting it to other sectors, such as tourism, such as education, such as conservation, and those are those are sectors that can also generate income for people in those regions. So at the very end, what you do is create steady income, not necessarily steady employment. Right? But that should be good enough to improve the development of many regions in the region.
We also have interviewed an organization called Finca La Ceiba. They promote ecotourism and agrotourism as well. Let's take a look.
La finca se desarrolla a nivel agroecológico, se desarrolla con los principios de permacultura, que son los principios de observación y de desarrollo de fases, considerando los valores de la naturaleza, ¿verdad? Los elementos, considerando lo que el agua, el fuego, el viento, la tierra, los elementos básicos, el aire. Y entonces a través de la observación de los espacios vamos definiendo qué cosas se van a ir desarrollando poco a poco. Comenzamos con la casa, con el área del trailer, que es la cocina donde está el fuego de la familia, y de ahí empezamos a expandir poco a poco las áreas para poder desarrollar las necesidades de las personas que estaban aquí. Visit Rico nos contactó y nos hizo unas preguntas claves, ¿verdad? En ese momento estábamos tan en shock que no sabíamos ni qué necesitábamos. Nos trajeron como magnífica aportación herramientas claves que son sumamente costosas y que en ese momento de caos ni siquiera se conseguían en el país. Es un bosque de alimentos. Se llama Food Foresting. La ayuda de Visit Rico fue crucial. Lo que nos hubiese tomado 6 meses nos tomó 2 días. Y gracias a la ayuda, a las herramientas, los fondos y todo el amor que trajeron estas personas a la finca, nos dio los primeros pasitos para levantar otra vez estos pininos y volver a coger ese empuje, esa inspiración y echar para adelante un poquito. Así que estamos sumamente agradecidos de lo que han hecho, no solo con nosotros, sino con montones de otras fincas que sabemos que son hermanos, que sabemos que también estaban en situaciones iguales o peores que nosotros. Y esperamos que las relaciones sigan y que la gente siga colaborando de una forma u otra.
La lección para mí más importante, les repito, fue ese reactivarnos de esperanza, de yo ver un pueblo capaz de defenderse a sí mismo, capaz de rehacerse a sí mismo. ¿Qué es lo que me repiten constantemente los agricultores? Ustedes fueron los primeros, ustedes fueron los que nos dieron la ayuda. Sin ustedes yo no hubiera podido volver a sembrar, sin ustedes no hubiéramos tenido semilla. Nos mandaron semilla de la diáspora, con esa semilla fue que se sembró. Y a todos les decíamos lo que nos decían ellos mismos, hay que sembrar cosas verdes rápidas para poderlas vender en el mercado. Visit Rico reactivó esos mercados agrícolas que eran importantísimos, porque eran punto de encuentro, pero además de eso, el verse unos a otros, el poderse hablar, el saber que se podían reactivar. Además, descubrimos que la agroecología realmente es más fuerte. Realmente sobrevive mejor una serie de cataclismos, la tierra colabora y es mucho más fuerte y produce mucho más después. Esa fue de las mejores lecciones que tuvimos.
Sin esa ayuda de las comunidades extranjeras, esto hubiese sido mucho más difícil. Esto no se ha acabado. Primero que nada, vivimos en una isla donde ya nos han pronosticado que esto va a seguir ocurriendo y tenemos que prepararnos. Y cosas tan sencillas como agua, sistemas de hincar pozos, de poder compartir estas aguas limpias que tenemos con la comunidad, para mí serían cosas como cruciales de necesidades inmediatas. Sería súper chévere accesar y poder lograr que sea para el beneficio de una comunidad y de las familias aledañas a estas comunidades. Tenemos que hacernos conscientes de que en este país tan abundante y tan bendito, con tanta tierra tan fértil, que uno tira una semillita y a los meses estás comiendo. Hacernos conscientes de esas bendiciones y aprovecharlas y compartirlas. Es una buena forma de ver, primero, que podemos alimentarnos de la tierra nosotros, compartir este alimento y tener buena salud.
Coming up next at Puerto Rican Voices.
I'm a Rican, be finding my own way, anyway.
He was a wordsmith. He also taught us a lot about the meaning and the power of words and writing.
The living room and kitchen of many desperate souls, tumbao, street, gutted movements.
Tato is indeed one of the most important New Yorker poets, but he's also a major poet.
He truly captured the essence of so many people who walk the streets of New York that no one sees and no one listens to and no one knows.
Give us your tired, your beaten, your triste, soledad, and sing for me.
You write your obituary with the days of your life. Tato has written his legacy with the poetry in his life.
Don't single me out, touch all our people, touch all our people, and maybe then you can touch me.
Welcome back to Puerto Rican Voices.
Ramon, now that we have examined these case studies, what can you tell us about what is needed in the agricultural sector to support these farmers recover from the impact of the hurricanes?
Number one, we need to recompose the agricultural extension system, which is never been, very powerful, but continues to have models of connecting to the farmer that are not fast enough, are exceedingly bureaucratic, and are not bringing those farmers the connectivity and the science and technology they need. Number two, we need strategies that are inclusive of multiple sectors within the agricultural sector. Sort of bringing the new generation that is interested in the farms, people who are connected to the land from sort of the old days, but there's a good number of new incomers that need to, that are interested in and that have very different views, have a very different set of skills. They can take advantage of those skills and the opportunities. And I think we need to support them. We need to give them science and technology. We need to give them investment, and we need to remove a great deal of bureaucratic red tape that is not allowing those youngsters to move ahead.
Did you see any organization from the diaspora helping these organizations or farmers directly to support their situation in production of agriculture?
Yes. We've met a number of those organizations. You have a variety of co-ops that have been formed. The League of Cooperatives of Puerto Rico has been supporting them. They have a unit that is beginning to give attention to those emerging small businesses. We have independent small farmers that are trying to find opportunity, trying to understand how can they improve their business. Also, the consumer has also been very important, that they are demanding products that can be grown locally and are willing to pay the premium for that. The universities are helping indirectly a great deal, but that effort needs to be more concerted, more directed, and more focused.
Looking at the future, do you think that that agriculture can go back on track of becoming one of the anchors of the Puerto Rican economy, especially in the current conditions where we import more than 80% of what we eat?
Well, my involvement in Puerto Rico has to deal with the work that the Center for Puerto Rican Studies has been doing in gathering people and beginning to motivate people to go back to Puerto Rico and make those connections. There is a variety of smaller foundations that also have been active in financing, at least providing seed grants for people to be able to spend a little time and connect with the actors. And most interesting, I've also received, as part of the work that I have been doing, a lot of requests from professionals, independent professionals, who might not necessarily have the money but have the skill and would be willing to continue engaging with those smaller organizations for the purposes of growing bigger projects. And so I think it's about promoting that connectivity. Some of it can lead to bigger projects, but I think the smaller projects can lead to bigger things if you continue at least to nurture that cumulative process.
In the context that we have discussed, what can you conclude about this episode? Especially, what do you think is the role of social entrepreneurship in supporting agricultural development?
Social entrepreneurship in agriculture is fundamental. Ultimately, you need to generate revenue, and you need people to feel motivated by seeing the fruits of their labor, accrue. And so we need to support those initiatives. However, we also need not to just be too romantic about it. We really need to make people understand that agriculture is hard work. And I think, once people understand that there are local opportunities, that is hard work, and that there are ways in which you can maximize your effort by connecting to a variety of resources that are available, but that we have not used effectively, I think we might be able to just use agriculture and see the future of agriculture in very different terms that we've seen in the past.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramon Borges Mendez, for being with us today. We really appreciate the work that you are doing in Puerto Rico. We really appreciate your expertise, and we thank you for guiding us through the agricultural sector and what we need to do to rebuild Puerto Rico.